So I guess to reiterate everything, to summarize everything, talismans, right? These are like an alternative to runes / soul cores. You put them in the sockets. From what we've seen, we've only seen 3, and they're not good. Like the 3 that we've seen are not good. None are better than soul cores, and like situationally, some might be better than runes, but like they're not going to be that good. They're only going to be useful, good for early mid game, before you can afford soul cores, and that's conditionally as well, because a lot of the times they're just not even going to be better than runes. Okay, the +1 -1 rings. These just, unless I'm missing something, these are just not going to be better than breach rings. I mean, I go over the math here a little bit, but essentially, a breach ring turns 6 affixes into 9, right? Because you get a 50% bonus to each affix. The new +1 -1 ring, and any ring, can only have 7.2 affixes, just because of the 20% multiplier that you can get on normal rings, right? So you're losing 1.8 affix to get an additional suffix but lose a prefix, or gain additional prefix but lose a suffix, right? If, even at the best, right, even like say you get like 4 prefixes, you're only getting 4.8 value of those prefixes, right? Whereas for only 3 prefixes for the breach rings, you're getting what? You're getting 4.5 value, right? 3 times 1.5. So you're only getting an additional 0.3 value on whatever prefix or suffix that you get from the base ring, but you're losing like 2.1 affix worth of value on like the prefix or suffix that you're missing out on. Because breach rings are so OP, I cannot imagine a world where these new +1 -1 rings are going to be valuable. I just can't see it. The amulets I'm not sure about, because amulets don't have broken bases like breach rings, right? The bases are good, like they definitely have value, like getting spirit, because the spirit base is the only way where you can get 60 spirit on your amulet, and that is incredibly valuable, but also incredibly rare. At the same time, I would say losing out on like 15 int or like 15 dex or like 15 item rarity to have an additional prefix or suffix, like that theoretically could be good, because you could get something like, because it's +2 -2, right? So you could theoretically get like 4 attributes and then like +3 melee skills, or like 4 attributes and then like crit chance or crit bonus for your attribute stackers, assuming that they're still good, right? That might be good. Or you can theoretically get like spell damage, spirit, item rarity, double ES, and then +3 projectiles for like a spark build. That I could see being good too. That I could see being better than like another amulet. That makes sense to me. But breach rings are too broken. I can't see a world where the rings are better than breach rings. The new essences, we've only seen 1, right? We've only seen 1, but this is going to be broken, I think. Well, number 1, ingenuity is either going to get hard nerfed in terms of like the value it gives, or it's going to have the drop rate nerfed. So if that's the case, it means that like either the value that the ingenuity gives is a lot lower, or that the cost to buy it is going to be a lot higher. In either case, that means that most players are going to be using rare belts for the majority of the first like 2 or 3 weeks of the league. So why is this broken then? It essentially gives you a 7 affix belt because it removes 1 affix that you can have, right? Because most belts can have up to 6. It removes 1 affix and gives you 2 implicits, right? It's not that good. It's maybe 6.5, because the implicits aren't as good as actual affixes, right? 6.5, I should say. The key thing here though is that for belts, right? The affixes, there's like 5 affixes that you want. Charm slot, and then like the 4 resistances. Maybe strength depending on your build, right? But for the prefixes, there's only 2 prefixes you want. Life and mana. Armor is kind of trash unless they buff armor a shit ton. Thorns is like the worst. Like this might as well just be like -1 affix. Life, mana, charm effect. These are all okay, but like you don't really care about them. These provide almost no value from a trade perspective, right? You're never thinking, oh, I hit flash recovery rate, like my belt is worth 5x more now. Like you just don't really care about that really, unless something changes. I mean, like there is a case for like them to have value, but it's not. These are like half an affix or like a third of an affix at most worth of value. Okay, so most of the time these rare belts, and this is why rare belts kind of suck, is that like you can only really roll 5 affixes on these belts. 3 out of the 5 really good suffixes, and then like 1 to 2 prefix, which is like mana or life. And keep in mind that like some builds don't care about life. Like if you're a chaos inoculation build, which like 70% of builds were, you don't care about life. So then you only really care about mana. And like some builds like don't even care about mana either. So it's like the reality of the situation is like at most you're hitting like 2 good prefixes, right? You're hitting like 2 good prefixes at most. So at most, a belt will have 5 prefixes. So if you can have your if you can have the essence roll the corruption mod and have 3 suffixes, then you can essentially get a 6.5 affix belt, assuming that 2 implicits are worth like 1.5. So this is going to be broken. Like this is going to be really good for crafting belts. The assumption has to be though that like, you know, they're not incredibly expensive. If they're like a div each or like 3 divs each, then like maybe not, right? But I would imagine that they're probably going to be like a third of a div to half a div, especially early on in the league. Okay. The next thing, fracturing orbs. This is going to be absolutely broken for mirror tier crafting. But like the common man, like you or I, we're not going to be able to utilize this. Essentially, what this fracturing orb does is it fractures 1 affix. I think you need to have up to 4 affixes in order for it to work. But if you have a rare item with 4 affixes, it fractures 1 of them so that it's no longer removable. And then that means that like that mini skills can never be removed. So if you chaos spam that ring or that amulet, you will never lose that +2 to minion skills. So this is really, really good for like late game mirror crafting, because you can hit, like, it just makes it a lot easier to hit 6 tier 1s or like 6 really, really high tier affixes on whatever item. The last thing we really need to talk about is Recombinator. Or Recombinator. This shit is absolutely broken in Path of Exile 1 to my understanding. It essentially allows you to combine 2 items into one, and you get to keep like certain affixes, or there's a chance to keep certain affixes. In POE 2, the way it works is the rare affixes have a lower percentage chance of staying on than like the less rare ones. And you can choose the number of affixes that you can keep. So if you want 6 out of 6 affixes, the odds of hitting that are a lot lower than if you only want 2 affixes between the 2 items that you're recombining. Okay. They gave an example. Oh, one other thing is that in POE 2, if the item fails to recombine, right? Like there's a chance that it recombines. If it fails, the item is destroyed. So there's not a lot of like failed craft resale value. That's bad. That's a -1 for recombing. Okay. Number 2 is that they gave an example that there's a 35% chance for 2 mods to hit. So you would imagine if it's like you want 4 mods, it's going to be like 10% or less, right? 3 mods is probably like 20%. So if that's the case, then it's very, very low likelihood to hit, right? Very, very low likelihood to hit. And like, keep in mind, like the bases that you use for these are going to be pretty expensive. Like if you have like a base with like double tier 1, especially in the early game, like that's going to be really, really valuable. Like probably like a bunch of X at the very least, right? Like maybe 10X. And like keep in mind, like 10X might be like a 1/5 of a divine at this stage of the game. And you would need to use that 2 times for a 35% chance to hit 2 mods. It just, the math doesn't add, the math ain't mathing on this. And not only that, but there's a 100 expedition currency price to even attempt this. So it's just like, it's so expensive. The odds of hitting are really low. It just doesn't make sense at the current iteration of how they set this up for this to work. It just doesn't seem good. The math ain't mathin'. Unless they giga buff the numbers on this, my prediction is that this mechanic is going to be absolute shit. Only situation where it could essentially give you any value on like an expected value, an EV level, is if you use it to recycle your failed crafts. But again, like I said, failed crafts early in the league have value, have a significant value. And also this 100 expedition currency price, I imagine, is going to actually be pretty expensive. Like I'm not sure how much this costs now, but like if this is like 10x, like a 1/5 of a divine, a 1/10 of a divine, then the price for this is just like so low, again, for the odds of hitting. And if you don't hit, again, your item is completely bricked. It's destroyed. So I don't think this is going to be good. Anyways, to summarize, talismans, I think, shit. Or at least like only useful like when you're leveling. New +1, -1 base rings, shit. It just doesn't make sense how they could ever compete or compare against breach rings. Breach rings are just too broken. Amulets, I'm not sure. There are some cases where like it would definitely be better to have this +1, -1 amulet over like the majority of amulet bases, because most amulet bases suck, with the caveat being spirit bases have the potential to be broken. The new essences, they only showed one, which is the belt one, and I think this is going to be broken, especially with ingenuity nerfs. But these essences are going to be the only way to craft really good belts. Go over the math a little bit here, but like it's just way better. Fractioning orbs, this is broken again, but only for mirror crafting, which is like, 99.999% of people won't ever be able to do. And then the last thing, Recon Bob, which I just talked about, I think it's going to suck. Unless it's Giga buff. It just, the math doesn't make sense.